Okay, let's go to Edmonton now, and it's been clarified. We're not going to the bubble. Gene Principe is on his deck, clearly. How you doing, Gino?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm not in the bubble, but there was a chance I was going to be in the bubble. It's been a moving target with the National Hockey League and Sportsnet, just trying to figure out who needs to be in there and if they can be in there and not stay in there. And originally, the role that I play and guys like Ryan Leslie in Calgary and Dan Murphy in Vancouver, we were going to be in there, or one of us was, and then they decided that you could get in and get out. Listen, I'm on the 7th floor. Players are on the 1st floor. We have another opportunity and a setup on the 5th floor at Rogers Place, and that's it. I mean, you certainly don't get near any players or any staff or any officials. We're a long ways away. So I think as the process evolved, they realized, listen, do we need to have these guys in there? No, it's in and out privileges to Rogers Place, and that's the only place we go.
Big change from what you're used to, though, Gene, because you're usually right next to the guys doing the interviews, right? So your world has changed. But so you can maybe answer that, one. And two, Ron McLean was on here yesterday. I said, are you having as much fun as it looked? Like on night one, he said, yes, we are. So I'll ask if you are as well.
Yeah, you know what, Ron? First of all, having Ron on was great. That just shows you Ron's got time for people from East Coast to West Coast. He is, a man of the people and a man of the country. It's different. It's still fun to go to the rink. It's never bad when you're going to the rink. It's just different. I think of all those times, and I know you've done it, with the Pats and the Riders. You're standing beside a player, and he's literally sweating on you and on your microphone, and you feel, as someone who, never got anywhere near that kind of level of play, you feel like you're in the action, but you're not blocking any shots or taking any hits, but you're close. And so now you feel removed, but it's still great. And I mean, it's exhibition games and only one, so everyone's ramping up quickly. It's fantastic to have hockey back. It's been interesting that Edmonton today's going to be a bit cool at about 25 degrees, but otherwise it's been 30 plus the last 2-3 days. So it's a time when generally people go on holidays from the hockey season, but instead people are using their holidays, setting up spots at on the deck or at the cottage or at the the trailer park, wherever you are. You're dialing into your favorite team and watching hockey.
You know what? It's interesting because Cuthbert said the other night most teams are used to coming through there when it's minus 40. They're not used to this, yeah. Right? What are the guys saying about that?
Yeah, it's very different. They have a nice kind of open area for the players to go to. There's been a lot of talk about golf outings. So, people say, well, how can you go to a golf outing if you're in the bubble? But, you take a team that maybe sweeps, gets through the best of 5 in 3 games, and they've got to wait 3 or 4, maybe 5 days for the next game. I mean, it's about team building, team bonding, and you can't just stay in the hotel and in that bubble area as well as it is set up. So they're going to have to try and keep these guys not so much busy, but give them a little bit of a mental break from a push through the playoffs, which is a 2-month run, usually kind of April, May into June. And now it's going to be late July, August, September, maybe into October. So they're loving it. I mean, it's a great setup. I just had to let the dog out. It's multitasking here. Edmonton hung around, Rod, and other cities were, perceived to be in the lead, but for whatever reasons that have, already gone public, things changed, and Edmonton was kind of the last hub city standing in the West, and it's worked out great, and it's really an opportunity to show off your city in July as opposed to January when there might be less to see.
I'm going to ask the guys. Producer Clark, can you find the photo of Jeff Reinbold on his deck in Hawaii? Because it looks like Gina's in the exact same spot as Reinbold in Hawaii. I don't think you're in Hawaii, but there was dogs running back and forth there too. Gene, what was your take on the Oilers 4-1 win over the Flames on Tuesday? Didn't go over very well in Calgary, obviously, and I would think Edmonton fans are pretty excited with how it went down.
Yeah, I think you're not going to be sure of what exactly is going to happen, after 4 months individually for a player to kind of get themselves up to speed, and then as a team figuring things out. The power play, which was number 1 in the National Hockey League when we had the NHL go to a pause, looked like a number 1 power play team. Connor McDavid looked like a guy who was second in scoring, and Leon Draisaitl looked like a guy who was first in scoring. I think that these guys, apart from having game action, they were working out, they're training, they're preparing. I mean, this isn't the old days where, guys would come to camp and get themselves into shape. I was very impressed, and I'm sure this applies to not just Edmonton, but other teams, Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, who's in it, Montreal, Winnipeg. They're here and they're ready to go. If you didn't know that there had been a 4-month break and you just sort of stepped in and watched the beginning of training camp, you're like, wow, these guys are flying. It looked more like a late September into early October. There's no easing their way in, both into the playoff system and play-in system. So there's no easing your way into training camp. Once everyone knew this was coming back, it was full steam ahead for all of these players, more individually than as a team. They were able to do it. So I've been very impressed at how good and how fast all of these teams have come back ready to go.
No kidding. They are high octane. Now have a look at your screen, Gino. The boys have found it. Can you throw it up? The Jeff Reinbold side by side. Jeff Reinbold, Hamilton Tiger Cats special teams coordinator. Yeah. It was the same. I think you're at the same place. Same look.
Yeah. I'm not in Maui. I am in Edmonton, but I will say it has felt a little bit like Maui the last few days. It has been, in Edmonton. And listen, I know on the prairies, Winnipeg and Regina, through Saskatchewan, oftentimes you get into the 30s and it can last. Edmonton, I think it's more of a 23, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus city, but that was good. I like that dissolve back and forth. But we've hit 30 plus, and it's supposed to be literally warm like this, high 20s for the next 10 days or so. So challenges for the ice crew, but I know when I was in there the other night for that exhibition game with Louis DeBrusque and Chris Cuthbert, they're saying that with no fans in the stands and with the heat outside, they've got the building about 7 or 8 degrees colder than they normally would, than regular season-wise. You can feel it. But it is necessary with all the action that's going to be on that rink. I mean, those guys are going to be, and gals are going to be the first, second, maybe third stars in making sure that we can get through July, August, September, and potentially the first couple of days of October without any ice issues.
Well, you know what? If anybody can handle it, it's the guys in Edmonton. And obviously Kyle Lamke in Toronto is a close friend of mine. He's taking care of that at Scotiabank Arena. But remember the 90s, Gene? Even the 80s, the Fog Bowl in Boston and Dallas. It was always a huge problem in Dallas. They were skating in slush. We don't hear about that anymore in any rink. So they really got it figured out. And what I'm told is it's technology.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Rod. It's technology, and it's a love for what they do, just like you love what you do. They take their pride, and I'll tell you this: they're a little bit like a restaurant. If they get a bad critique or a bad comment, or even a so-so one, they take it very personally, and I think that's what drives them. Listen, this is center stage for Toronto and Edmonton. There's no other hockey, no other cities that are. They're going to have their watch parties and get together and socially distance. And so hockey's going to be North American wide. But there's only 2 cities and 2 rinks that are going to be hot and heavy with action for a long time. And so they want to get it right. And I don't blame them. And that's part of the bid. When you put the bid in for an Olympics, you have to make sure you've got the right facilities and the right people. Well, the 2 facilities here and in Toronto have the right people. So I don't foresee any issues. There'll be some challenges along the way, but they'll react and respond. And Dan Craig, who used to run the old building here, Northlands Coliseum, eventually turned into Rexall Place after a few name changes, is on hand. And I've never seen Dan he's had good ice in real freezing cold and temperatures that hovered around 0 or above with the sun shining for all those outdoor games. So the ice will be the least of our worries because I think it's definitely in very good hands.
For sure. I met Dan. He did the ice at the Regina Agrodome for the 01 Memorial Cup. And by the way, I had supper with David Ayres at Wendell Clark's in Saskatoon before a Rush game, Gene. And as you know, he's the head ice guy at Ricoh Coliseum in Toronto, plus, of course, the sensation of the NHL season. And when it came to ice, his eyes just lit up like that. Like you say, they take so much pride in it. It's their whole life. I totally get it.
once there's I won't say his name, but there's a guy who works at the ice crew in Edmonton, and it was early on, and new building, and they really had to figure a lot of stuff. The technology, as you mentioned, Rod, is great. You have to be able to manage that technology. So a new building, they went to Connor McDavid when they were setting up the ice and the plans. Why wouldn't you go to the fastest guy on the planet on ice, and a guy who's a franchise player and part of the NHL franchise as well, just to kind of check out what he would like, what seemed to work for him. But I remember one day, and it was early on, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I heard that you had some bad things to say about the ice." I'm like, "No, I don't think so." "Well, yeah, a friend of mine's wife works with your wife." I'm like, first of all, I barely talk to my wife with 3 kids. But secondly, if I'm talking to my wife, I am not talking to her about the ice service at Rogers Place. I said, "Stand down. Don't worry about it. You got bad info about fourth hand." So everything is good with me, good with my wife, good with us, and good with the ice. So don't worry about it. You just do what you're doing. Everything's going to be fine.
I've often wondered about covering the Oilers in Edmonton and just how word gets around. My God, you'd be so afraid of who you talk to and what. Hey, just lastly, before I let you go, Gene, do the players have a hockey tournament, minor hockey feel? Is there excitement and exuberance amongst those guys that's kind of back to the way it all began for them? Because that's what it looks like to me.
100% spot on. Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey, one of the best nicknames in the sport, said the exact same thing leading up to this tournament, because it is like a youth tournament. Oftentimes the hotels are a bit different. But you'd stay where the other teams would stay, right? You'd have your team jackets on. You kind of walk by and give them a bit of a dirty look or a bit of a snarl, depending on who the opponent is, if you knew them, if you had a rivalry with them. But he said it reminded him of when he would be in what, it was a huge tournament, the Brick Invitational. So many teams from your area and across Canada and North America have come to Edmonton, enjoyed the mall, enjoyed the water park, and enjoyed the ice for a tournament, which this summer, unfortunately, has been canceled. So, yeah, I think a lot of these players who have played in that tournament or elsewhere in their respective areas feel like that's, exactly it. As we get through the qualifying round, be less teams around, but that's the way it is for them. I think a little bit more on the line, but if you take them back to when they were youth hockey players, there was a lot on the line then as well. Maybe not the Stanley Cup, but the own tournament that was, available to them and whatever trophy came with it. So good analogy and one that the players agree with you on, Rod.
Well, these hockey tournaments now, they're handing out Stanley Cups and rings for the kids. Don't get me started. Gene, I'll let you get back to your Rays. This has been awesome, and we're watching every night. Thanks for the time, brother, and keep up the great work.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Anytime as well. Same to you.
Thank you. Gene Principe from Edmonton joining us from outside the bubble. Nick Nielsen had a few questions for him. Nick writes in and says, seeing players watching overtime through the glass in the corner, it looks awesome. It does. Nick is the voice of the Red Wings. And he also wanted me to ask about if there's a COVID outbreak, what will the NHL do? I did ask Ron McLean that yesterday, and he completely jumped right out of the way. They don't want to talk about that. I asked Darren Dreger, Dupes, and he said this on this show, and he said, well, they have a plan, but they don't want to say what it is. I don't even think the media knows what it is.
No, but that was the purpose for the expanded rosters and why you keep those groups separately. So if one group gets it, you've got a backup group ready to go. You've got other guys. And if you have to bring more people in and do 2 weeks, you will, or go with smaller rosters. But that was the big reason around the extended rosters. So that's got to be part of it.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.